Howdy, I'm Bob Terry. Welcome to Western Trails. In this episode of Western Trails, we have a very special treat. We were asked to record one of the panels during the Western Legends Roundup in Kanab, Utah. On this panel are Rudy Ramos, Mariette Hartley, Ben Bates, Terry Bomar, Don Collier, Darby, Hinton, and Neil Summers. And they have wonderful stories about the behind-the-scenes filmings in the Westerns that they were in. You probably remember Rudy from High Chaparral, and Mariette from Ride the High Country. And Ben Bates, he did a lot of things. He's a stuntman, but he was James Arness's stuntman in the last several seasons of Gunsmoke. Terry Bomar is an author. Don Collier, you know him from movies like War Wagon and from the High Chaparral. Then Darby Hinton, well, he was Israel Boone on the Daniel Boone Show. And Neil Summers hosts this panel. And Neil has been a stuntman in Hollywood forever, and he's done so many things. Sit back, relax, kick your boots up, enjoy this, and we'll see you after the show.
I know a lot of you did some filming here in Kanab, and Darby, we've already heard from you something on that. Anybody else, could you share some memories about filming here in Kanab?
I was here on the Death Valley days many years ago, but it's been so long ago, I forgot it. It was a lot of fun. I enjoyed the town. We did a good show, and that's about it. Okay, next question.
From 1972 until Gunsmoke ended, we came here every year to film outside stuff that needed to be filmed. And it's really disappointing to see Johnsontown laying on the ground. That town has so much history that it takes quite a while to compile it all. Jim Arness was never not one ounce of ego in that man. He took care of the people. He was the most loyal actor I've ever met, and I worked on a lot of movies, Hollywood, some features, but he took care of the people that he surrounded himself that took care of him. To work with him is just like sitting here visiting you folks, down to earth, just one of the guys. He was a happy-go-lucky guy. He liked a good joke, and he wasn't beyond putting something on you either. So, I've had a lot of jobs in my life, but that's the one job that I look forward to going to work every day, to go to work on Gunsmoke. It was one big family. We all got along. We took care of one another. It was fantastic.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Mariette, and the very first television show I did was Gunsmoke. It was a wonderful episode called Cotter's Girl. It was written by a terrific writer named Kathleen Holt. I don't know if any of you guys did one of her scripts, but it was just terrific. And there's something I would like to say about Jimmy, whom I adore and was one of the funniest men alive. But he was very, very nervous about, I talk and they talk. Great. Why is it like my family? What? Anyway, there was something something wonderful about the script in that this was a kind of a Pygmalion. It was a girl whose father had just died. She was living on a farm. She was living on her own devices. She was eating nuts and berries and climbing trees. That's kind of all she did with bare feet. And what Jim had to do was to take her all the way from wherever she was living on his big horse. He put me up on the rear end of that horse, which was 7 or 8 feet tall, wasn't it? 9 feet tall, and about 4 feet wide. I couldn't walk for 2 weeks. Now, I was 21, and I was pretty flat, you know. I had shoulder blades, but not much else. And Jimmy was very afraid of getting a reputation as the sheriff in the town, of taking girls back from towns to his place. So he needed somebody who was kind of flat in the front and not very sexy. So he met me himself at the casting office and read with me. Now, that is very unusual, I think all of you guys will admit. And I was hired the next day. I couldn't believe it. It was one of the most glorious experiences of my life. I just some great pictures. Because one of the lines was, and I think some of you have seen it. One of the lines was, "I'm missing you, right? What is it? I'm missing you. What was his first name? Dylan. I'm missing you, Dylan. And I want to hug you." And he'd say, "Clara, you can't talk like that. You just can't say those kind of things." And I'd say, "Why?" He said, "Well, you just can't." And at the very end of it, Kitty came up behind him and said, "I'm missing you, Dylan." And it's a wonderful episode. And I know you can either YouTube it or get it not on DVD, but whatever. Anyway, thanks.
Let me add one other thing to that. I asked Marianne the other day, has she climbed any trees lately? She didn't take that very funny. No, she did. She laughed about it. But I thought it was very fitting because I hadn't seen Marianne for quite a while. And I asked her, have you been climbing any trees lately? She just grinned.
You want to talk about Duke? Yeah, go, Don.
We went down to Mexico in '69 to do a picture called The Undefeated. And, oh yeah, it was a good picture. Thanks, folks. And when we pulled into Baton Rouge, I was driving a rented car, and a couple of big guys walked over to me and said, "Mr. Collier?" And I said, "Yeah." They said, you going to drive this car while you're in town? I said, "Well, I haven't thought about it. Why?" They said, "Well, while you're here, you need a driver in there." I said, "Why?" He said, "Well, this is a union town." I said, "Well, I probably won't be driving this car." And I told Duke about this, and he said, "Yeah." He says, "I don't think I'll ever do another picture here." He said, "I don't like these guys." He says, "Boys, you gather us all together, boys." He said, "When you're walking around, don't stand still too long in one place because these guys," he said, "will steal the spurs right off your boots." So we're lining up a shot one day. It's the Confederates going to attack us Union forces down here behind a fence. About 40 of us guys are down there with rifles. And the bad guys are up on the hill, mounted, about 40 of them, and there's 5 cannons up there. Now they're going to charge down that hill and kill us all down here. And so Duke is lining up that shot. He's talking to old Hal Needham, the stunt coordinator, and he says, "Now, Hal," he says, "I brought these boys down from Hollywood. Let's mount them up." And the Union guy says, "Hold it, Mr. Wayne." He says, "We don't want no Hollywood boys on those horses. We've got out-of-work teamsters that need a day's work." And Duke says, he says, "No, hold it, no." He says, "We won't let you do this shot unless our boys are on those horses." So Duke says, "Okay." He says, "Mount them up. Go get them up on the hill there." He says, "Hal, you up there?" And he says, "Get all these boys in place." He said, "Put about 10 of them between each cannon up there." And there was 5 cannons. You got them all lined up. And he says, "Hal," he says, "you know the cue?" And Hal says, "Yeah, when the cannons fire, the boys will go." He says, "That's it." He says, "All right, everybody ready?" Everybody's ready. He says, "Action." And man, when they fired those cannons, you talk about action. We saw every stunt that could possibly be performed that day. We're down there behind this fence firing our guns, and man, were we killing them. They were falling all over the place. Finally, Duke says, "Cut." Turned to that Union guy and he says, "What do you think?" And the Union guy says, "I think you better mount your boys, Duke, and let's do it again." It did, yeah. I don't think we used it in the picture.
Let me tell you a little something about John Wayne and Jim Orness. Jim and I, we were down in Tucson, and Wayne called Jim up and he said, "How about coming up to Red River here?" He said, "I just put in a new computerized feed mill for my feedlot." He said, "I'd like to take you around and show you, how things operate." So Jim agreed to go. So Jim asked me, he said, "What are you doing?" Sunday? And I said, nothing, just hanging around the hotel. He said, you want to go down up to Wayne's? I said, sure. Well, he said, let me call Wayne. So I called him up, and he said, yeah. I said, bring your cowboy stunt man on up here. I said, I'll show him some good horses. And he did. He had a lot of them up there. But anyway, we get up there and we bum around all morning. We get time to go to lunch. So we're sitting there having lunch. Jim, he orders a big old T-bone steak. I ordered a big old T-bone steak. Now, Wayne was getting ready to do the shootist, and he was a little overweight. So here his manager, his partner's wife, brings in this little tomato salad thing she has cooked up on him. Jim looks over around Wayne. He said, Ben, he says, how's your steak? I says, good. It's very tender, not knowing what he's getting at. Well, he said, looked at Wayne. He said, there's no use in asking you how yours is. Wayne says, you know how you two got here? You can leave. But Wayne and Jim were very, very close. Because if it hadn't been for Wayne, Jim wouldn't have been Matt Dillon.
Rudy, are you at liberty to talk about the windfall you've just come into, or you want to keep it secret?
No, it's public knowledge. They're filming now. I've just been cast in a modern day Western starring Kevin Costner, and yeah, and it's going to be on what is now Spike TV cable channel. As of January 1st, 2018, that will become Paramount Network. So this is Paramount's first time out of the gate in the cable field. And Kevin's the face of that network right now. The name of the show is called Yellowstone. It's being filmed up in Salt Lake City right now. I'll be there next week. And the writer of the film, of the show, it's a 10 episode miniseries. Wrote Hell and High Water, the movie that was out last year that won an Academy Award. Jeff Bridges was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor, and I think the writer won Best Screenplay. So he's a wonderful writer. I've read the first 3 scripts. They're awesome. It's going to be a big-time project, and I'm very fortunate to be a part of it. I don't know how big a part of it I'm going to be. I'm in 3 episodes for sure out of 10, but that's of the first 6. So it could be more. It could be, that's it. I don't know. But I'm very excited. It's nice to be on the national stage again. No disrespect to this stage. But it's going to be a big project. It will be shown in summer, next summer, 2018. So that's my good news. And also, Mariette, I'm doing my Geronimo one-man show today at 3:30 over at the Crescent Moon Theater. We had a great show yesterday and a wonderful audience. We were pretty full. I was surprised. And I think that it's going to be even more people today because I've actually heard a lot of talk about yesterday. So I'm real pleased with it. It's an honor to bring it here. I've been doing this show for 3.5 years on the road from Los Angeles to Memphis. It's a one-man show. It's a 60-minute show. It's about the last 23 years of Geronimo's life as a prisoner of war in his own country. It's a seldom told story, but it's a story that I have felt for 30 years needs to be told, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to just let my audiences, which are always intelligent audiences, see the performance, hear the story, and then they can make up their own mind. Because there's never been another side of the story as far as the Native point of view. There's only been one side. Well, this is the other side. And then you can make up your mind whether you buy it or not. I personally do. I was raised in that environment. So if you get a chance, come by, take a look. Like I said, it's at 3:30. Tickets are being sold at the door. And I'd love to see you there. And if you do come, please stay afterwards. We had a wonderful question and answer yesterday after the show. You were there. I see you nodding your head. And usually they're like 15, 20 minutes. This went on for about an hour because people had questions and I like to talk. So we'll see you there. If you come, please say hello. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Mariette, If you don't mind, would you give us some of your reminiscences, pro and con, on Ride the High Country?
Oh, God, you just woke me up. I'm sorry. I was just, yeah, oh, no. Yeah, congratulations. Now they're talking behind my back. That's great. It's all right. Wow. Yeah, first of all, I just got to say that I come from Connecticut. So I'm a Connecticut Yankee, and I didn't have much, we didn't watch television much because we didn't have television. So I didn't know who any of these guys were. I actually didn't until today. So, but when I came here, it was like being Alice in Wonderland. I mean, it was just bizarre. I didn't have an agent, I didn't think, but I did have one from the East Coast. And I decided one day, after about 3 weeks of not working, and that was to me a terribly long time because I had done nothing but theater, and I kind of walked into William Morris, that was my agency apparently, and said, I want to work. And I was introduced to Phil Kellogg, who was the head of movies at that time, one of the biggest and most wonderful agents in the world. And I'll make a long story short, as my kids would say, it's too late, Mom. We went to Romanoff's. Do you remember Romanoff's? Anybody? Darby, would you pay attention, please? I asked you a question. Okay. So anyway, that was a big restaurant. And the next day, 2 days later, he introduced me to a man named Sam Peckinpah.
I've heard of him.
Oh, shut up. He was at MGM at the time. He was casting his second movie it was then called Guns in the Afternoon. And it was then ultimately called Ride the High Country. And it was with a couple of guys. I had no idea who they were. It was Joel McRae and Randolph Scott and then these kids, one named Ron Starr, who changed his name from Ron Starr, S-T-A-R to S-T-A-R-R. So it was, and Sam read with me. He had his feet, his boots on his desk and his cowboy hat on, and we read together, and he looked at me and he said, I think I'm in love with you. And I had never heard anything like that in my life. I mean, I dated in high school, but
welcome to Hollywood.
Yeah, gosh, I mean, that was it. It was like Alice in Wonderland. So then I went to get my costume fitting. Anyway, it was a lovely costume. I was wearing a lot of people's old costumes, and it was a wonderful, wonderful experience. I wish that I had known Joel better. I wish that I had known the Preston Sturges films that he had done and how wonderful he was in them, because there were one or two moments when we were together alone before the end of the movie, and I wish I could have asked him questions about it. As it was, I had one question to ask him. I said, Joel, he said, yeah. He was very gentlemanly to me. And I said, how do you do this? I did nothing but theater. How do you do this? And he said, well, you seem to be doing real well. And I said, no, please just tell me, how do you prepare for a scene? And he said, oh, well, I read the scene before the one I do. That never occurred to me. And you have to, because you have to know where you are on the script. Because in the movies, as many people know here, you hardly ever do it one scene at a time, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, fifth scene. You always do at the end of whatever was available. And he said, and then I stick in my stomach and go on. And that's what he did. He made it as easy as that, and that's the kind of person he was. So it was a wonderful experience, except for the Hammond brothers, who scared the hell out of me. I mean, literally scared the hell out of me. And that was Jimmy Drury, Warren Oates, John Anderson, Johnny Chandler, and L.Q. Jones, whose 90th birthday, surprise birthday, we just celebrated. So it was a wonderful experience. Thanks for the question.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we had Grizzly Adams, the man himself, up here for 3 years in a row, and we lost him a couple of years ago. But the most precious memory we have of him is his escapades as he went through life. Terry Bomar is now going to tell you about what he pulled down at Milagro, Trump's village down in Florida. So Terry, let the folks have it.
Well, Dan and I met several years ago, over 20 years ago, and I hired him to be our national spokesperson for the charity that I'd started. And I'd hired a couple of other celebrities, and they died. Each one of them died, and then somebody said, why don't you try Dan Haggerty? And I said, who's Dan Haggerty? He said, well, no, he's Grizzly Adams. I said, I didn't watch the show. And he said, well, give him a shot. And so I was out in L.A. at the time, and so I went into Sportsman's Lodge, and here comes Dan Haggerty, and he walks in the door, and we became friends in 5 minutes. And I said, Mr. Haggerty, I said, I think this is going to work. I said, we made a deal right there, and I said, I'll take you to dinner. You just pick the place, and I'll just take you to dinner. And that was a mistake. You never tell somebody like Haggerty to pick the place.
There's nobody like Haggerty.
So $750 later, me and him finished dinner. And I got the bill, and I thought, no, I don't want to buy the restaurant. I just was wanting the dinner. And so that's how we became friends. But I live in Palm Beach, and he lived in L.A., and I said, this ought to work because it looks like we need an entire nation in between us to get along. Well, so he flew over to my house in Palm Beach, and when he got there that night, I put him in the bedroom, the air conditioner blew up, and the next thing I know, at about 11 or 12 o'clock at night, he's knocking on my bedroom door saying, hey, I got 2 inches of water in my bedroom. Did that come with the plan or what? So I had Haggerty and me out back and working on the air conditioner at 1 o'clock in the morning. He said, I never met a guy like you. He said, you got to manage me. And I said, that's kind of how it's always been. So that same year, I had him over to Palm Beach. We had an art gallery. We were opening it up, and he was going to help me open it up. And so he took off, him and his buddy, and Bill, he called him his brother. I thought he was his brother for 2 years. It was a lie. But it took me 2 years to figure that out. But him and Bill took off in Palm Beach. If you understand, it's an island, and all the big wigs live on that island, and my gallery was there. And he and Bill took off, wanted to see what Palm Beach was like. So they were driving up and down the ocean highway, and he had to go to the bathroom. So he looked, and he saw something that looked like a golf course, and he pulled into the golf course and pulled right up to the door, and it was Donald Trump's house. And so the doorman walked out of the door and said, wow, Grizzly Adams, we didn't know you were coming. Are you here for the Diana Ross concert tonight? Well, you got to know Dan. He said, oh, absolutely. That's why I'm here. By the way, can I use the restroom? And so he said, yeah. And he used the restroom. And he said, listen, I'll be right back. I got to go get my manager. And so he came and got me. And he said, Terry, get in the car. And I said, where are we going? He said, just shut up and get in the car. Get in the car. Get in the car. And I said, where are we going? I got in the car, we're driving up and down. I knew it was Donald Trump's house. He starts to pull into the driveway. And I said, no, you can't come in here. He said, it's Donald Trump's house. He said, I know what I'm doing. And I said, no, you can't. They will run me off the island. And he said, no, come on, just follow me. We go up to the door. The doorman comes out. Mr. Haggerty, you're back. We're so glad. 5 minutes later, we're sitting around the pool. Donald Trump's walking by. We're having drinks, and Diana Ross starts singing. And he looks at me and said, I told you to follow me, boy. I know how to do this. So we ended up having the whole concert, everything, and Dan's talking to everybody that walks through the door, and Donald's walking by a couple of times talking to him. And finally, everybody goes to bed, and we're the last ones in the place. And it was about Christmas time, and he was staying at my house, and I had poinsettias in my house. And he said, man, now he said, you got some nice poinsettias, but look at these in Donald's place. He said, they are huge. You need one just like that. I said, yeah, they would look great. And then I didn't really know Dan quite as well as I do now. And as we were going through the lobby and everybody was leaving and the whole place was over and done, Dan walks, he just kind of fades into the background. Me and Bill go out to the car. We get the car and they pull it up. Next thing we know, here comes Dan holding a giant poinsettia in his hands. He kicks the door open. He says, get the door, open the door to the car. He shoves it into the back seat of the car. I said, what are you doing, Dan? He said, just shut the door, let's go. I said, did you steal Donald Trump's poinsettia? You got to be kidding me. And he said, yeah, well, Donald's got a bunch of them. He doesn't need them. You need one. And I said, yeah, he's got a lot of cameras too. Well, that's how me and Dan started out. It's the same way all the way to the last day. And the last thing I ever heard Dan say to me was, I love you, T. And I'll never forget it. And and it's so great. From his relationship, I got to meet people like Rudy and Neil and Darby and Don. And I'd like to say that these are some of the best friends a guy could ever have. I'd like to say that, but I can't. But anyway, I know them. Hallelujah.
Well, they shot Gone with the Wind quicker than that. Ben.
Yes, sir.
Ben and I did a show of Gunsmoke up at Bryan's Head, Utah, up the road about an hour. It's 11,000 feet up. And it was the last season called Matt Dillon Must Die. And Morgan Woodward has kicked Jim Arness out in the snow with dogs after him. Well, you know who had to do that was Ben. And I'd like him to elaborate on that for you folks about what he went through at 11,000 feet, 6'7" with a buffalo coat on.
It was a long, cold day's run. Well, the scene was Morgan Woodward was after Jim. And Jim had got away, and he had this big old buffalo coat on, had a radio, he had his sidearm on. There's a horseback, and I'm afoot. I'd run a while till I'd run out of air, and they'd say, duck out of the scene, duck out of the scene. So I'd find me a bush to hide behind, and here come Morgan and the horses. Okay, they'd cut. Okay, Ben. Okay, we're ready now. Get back out there, get in the scene. Start running. So I'd take off running again. About 3 of these. Then we get to the point where the good stuff starts. We got to go uphill. I got uphill, but I didn't quite get out of the scene. I collapsed over a log that they had this camera set behind. I collapsed right over this log. And they said, you got to get out of the scene. You're still in the scene. I literally crawled out of the scene. I'm out of air. They go getting the oxygen and everything. Victor French, good friend of mine, super nice guy. He looks at me, he was directing. He looked at me and he says, Ben, he said, I don't really know how to tell you this, but he said, we're going to have to do this over. And I gasped for one last breath. And I looked up at him. I said, Victor, I don't know how to tell you this, but we ain't going to do this again. Arnett, he was standing by and he got a big kick out of it. He said, surely you got enough, you don't have to do that again. And they didn't, they shot it. But Victor, he was just messing with me.
Question.
I have a question for Mariette Hartley. It's a James Garner question. Somebody else may also have a story. I was wondering if you had a James Garner story. You're so well known for the commercial, and I know you were also on the Rockford Files, but he was such a good Western and other stars.
Oh gosh. Well, my book has a whole chapter on it. I have my books here. Has a whole chapter on how I got the Polaroid commercials. I've always loved Jimmy, and I always wanted to work with him. And this is the other Jimmy. Too many Jimmys. And I don't know if you know how the beginning ones began, but this is a one step. And I said, well, how many steps are there? What do you do? And he said, well, you aim the picture and you press the button. And I said, but that's 2 steps. And he said, we don't say that. Now, that was not written. I improvised that. And it was so wonderful. I thought, oh my God, I'll never get it, because I improvised it, and of course that's the one that they went with. And then I got kind of what they call a day rate. It depends upon how you're working, but what you're doing. But as an actor, you get a day rate. Then in those days, it was about $600 a day, which to me was a lot of money. I did about 6 of those commercials, and I said to my agent, you know, this looks like it's going to be kind of a gig. Maybe we should rethink this. How much money does Jimmy get? Well, I never got the amount of money that Jimmy got, but he was very, very generous with me. He was the one that insisted on doing different commercials, like the Geico commercials today, right? They're all different commercials, and they sell a lot of merchandise. And that's what happened with the Polaroid commercials. We did many different commercials. I did 7 years of commercials with Jim. We did 15-second spots. We did 10-second spots that we put together as a minute. I mean, it was just an amazing group of commercials. 7 years, 250 commercials. And they were classic. So I was very, very grateful. I was also grateful to speak to him before he passed. Because he was kept very, very far away from people who loved him for some reason. Yeah, super, super good guy. Anyway, thanks for the question.
I've just been told we got 7 minutes and then we have to wrap it up. Do me a favor, our friend here, Darby, hasn't had much microphone time in a few minutes. Say something to ask Darby a question out there, please.
See, they have no questions. I've said it all. I talk too much as it is. Oh, there we go. There we go.
Hi, Darby.
Hello.
Darby's Darby's darling.
My mom might be excited about that, but I think of everybody up there, you're the only one that had a long-running one show. I know, Don, you were on several different shows, but you were on one show for 6 years. Who was your favorite co-star of all the different co-stars that came on that show?
There were so many great ones, like you say, and over 6 years, you know, Vincent Price, when I heard I had to work with him, it scared the heck out of me because I still don't like scary movies. It's just not my genre. I don't go to them. But for some reason, I had seen House of Wax, and now they tell me I got to work with this guy. Well, he turned out wonderfully. You know, the morning I had to first work with him, I'd find out where he was and stay on the other side of the set as much as I could. And then before I was doing a scene, I was in my chair going over the script, and all of a sudden his hand's on my shoulder. And I turn up and I look, and he's there, and I'm like, oh God, what? And he looks at me and goes, you know, Mr. Hinton, would you just do me a favor? My daughter's in love with you. Would you sign an autograph for her? And he was just the sweetest, nicest man. So I loved him, and you know, Neville Brand, I did a movie with him when I was 3 years old. I got to do a great show with him, and I did one of his last movies that he ever did. So there's just a lot of great people that came onto the Boone set that I got to enjoy.
There was another trick I played on Oregon Trail. I don't know how many people remember that one. With Rod Taylor, remember that? And he was drinking a little bit in those days, and I had a friend of mine who was just a lovely guy. And I said, let's play a trick. And I said, when they come in and they're shooting, we had a lot of extras, a lot. We had at least 200 extras, and us. And I said, let's do this. Action! It came rolling in, and Rod Taylor said, bang! The first bang, we all fell down. So I don't know if the director liked that a lot, but or the producer, but everybody fell down. I loved it.
You gotta have fun on the set. I mean, that's what it's all about.
And I also have to tell you one thing, just a quick one. I was shopping for a cradle for my wonderful son, who was about your age, is about your age. And he's so beautiful. And we went into like this iron place, and we saw this gorgeous cradle that was quite high, and it's the one that you put like a curtain on it, and you just rock it back and forth. And I said to my husband, my then husband, I've had several since then, I said, we've got to get this one. And it was a consignment place. And I said, who owned this before? And he said, Vincent Price. And he had it made for his daughter, whose name was Victoria. And he was a sweet, sweet man. Anyway.
Okay, I just got the word that we're history.
We're not history. We're Western living legends.
Don's ancient history.
Okay, we have
And I have to, before we do go, I really have to thank you. You stuck it out in this heat. A lot of you have driven a long way to come see us. And I know, you know, we talk about this at night and stuff, how much we really appreciate all of you coming out, sharing your stories with us too, and maybe how we touched you over the years and stuff. But, you know, it's all for you. We love you guys. Thank you so much for coming out.
Hurry up, get your pictures.
You know, if you've never been to the Western Legends Roundup in Kanab, Utah, you really should go. It's a wonderful place. There were so many movies filmed there, and they have a wonderful festival. There'll be wagon train rides out to movie sets. There's vendors, there's Western music. And 2018 is the Gunsmoke reunion. There's going to be so many Gunsmoke cast members there with so many stories about Gunsmoke, and there'll be other Western stars there as well. My name's Bob Terry. We hope you'll join us again here next time. Have a great day, and we hope to see you again on Down the Trail.